I'm going to try to show you the easy way to change your front shocks and springs on any 93 to 02 F-body. Here we go. Okay, so here we are on the passenger front corner of my F-body. As you can see, I got the new shock and spring in there really nice. I got the old shocks and springs right here. So every tutorial that I watched, they took this out, right? This is not necessary. This ball joint can remain. The reason I did that is because look how rusty this car is. This car is pretty crusty, been in Michigan for 20 years, has over 100,000 miles on it. I don't want to take this apart because when I do, I'm going to have to replace it, and I really do not want to do that. I'm kind of cheap. So here's how I did it. I started off with removing the caliper. Take the caliper bracket off. I kept it all one piece, zip tied it up to the body. The reason I did this is because I moved this whole arm several times to get the old shock out and the new shock in and pop it in and all that good stuff. So it's best just to get the caliper out of the way. The next thing I did is remove the sway bar end links. So as you can see, there's my stock sway bar, and I have the new end link on because I broke the stock ones. Apparently that's pretty normal. So you take that off. Now you have to do that on both sides, because if you just do one side, you're going to find that the sway bar still doesn't want to move. So you have to do both sides, and then you have to reinstall it 2 sides at a time as well. So then once you do that, I took the wheel speed sensor out. It's that little connector right there. You just pop it out. There's a tab on the top and a tab on the bottom. Then the sensor just pops right out. I also did that same reason that I did the caliper, just so I have a little more room to play with. And I don't have to worry about breaking the brake hose or the wheel speed sensor wires. So then, once I did that, I went up top here. And on the passenger side, we get lucky. And we get lucky because we have the four connecting points up here. We have the 2 nuts with the post that come up from the bottom, and then we have the 2 nuts that go down. Now on the passenger side, these are easily accessible. The driver's side, not so much. I'm going to get to the driver's side later. So you take these out, pretty basic setup. But now coming back in here, you take the lower shock bolts out. So there's a nut on the bottom, up in here, and there's a nut right there on the top. There's one of those on both sides of the shock. You take those out. Now once you've done this, you're ready to take it out. Notice how I did not take the upper ball joint out. I left that there. This has not come undone. The tie rod has not come out. I left the tie rod there for the same reason. This car is so old that once I remove this, I'm going to have to replace the entire piece because it's going to break when I take it apart. It's not bad at the moment. It's not loose or anything. Otherwise, I would obviously replace it. But right now, it's so old and crusty that once I take it apart, there's no getting it back together. So once you have the upper shock bolts out and the lower shock bolts out and the sway bar disconnected, the caliper off, all that, you can actually grab onto this spindle here and simply yank it down. That's all I did. I put my body weight onto this spindle, pulled it down, pulled the shock from out of the shock tower, and it comes out and it rotates this way. Now once it rotates this way, you can take these bolts out from the upper control arm. The inner one is a 18, the outer one is a 15. You're going to take those out on both sides of this upper control arm, and then the shock will quite simply slide out of the car. That's how I got these out. Then with your new shock, once you have it assembled like I did, you're going to simply slide it back in, and then you can loosely do these bottom bolts if you want. I think that's what I did, if I remember correctly. Then I did the reverse process. I pulled this down with my body weight, and I simply slide it, pushed it down, slid it back into these holes. I had my friend on top kind of guiding it, and then we pushed it back up into the shock tower, tightened everything back up. Now what's important is you're going to want to tighten this upper control arm before you push the shock back in, because there's not a whole lot of room to play with in there. So make sure you get this control arm nice and snug before you put it back in there. But then once you got that in there, you can snug the lower bolts, you can snug the upper bolts, you can put your caliper back on, your wheel speed sensor, your sway bar, you can do all that, and then you're done really. The driver's side's a little trickier, and there's one part of the driver's side that makes it more complicated, and that's with these upper bolts. Now if you see here, you have a master cylinder, right? So 3 of your bolts are easily accessible. This one over here where my finger is, not so much. I hope you guys can see that. So what you're going to have to do is remove this master cylinder. It's not a complicated process, it's just hard to get to. So you see you have a nut right there, and you have a nut on the other side, right there. They're 15 millimeter. So you're gonna get a wrench in there. I think I used a socket for this side and a ratcheting open-ended for this side. They're both 15s. So you're gonna pull that nut off. Now once you have both nuts off, you're gonna see that the master cylinder doesn't really wanna move anywhere. So you're gonna have to grab it like this and pull it harder than you want to, because I was worried I was gonna break one of the brake lines. I didn't, thankfully, but I thought I was going to. So you're gonna pull it off of the post that the master cylinder is mounted to, and simply put it out of the way. I got it so it was just, the reservoir was resting on this rubber seal here, this cowl seal. So I pulled that out, set it up there, and then I had access to this Torx bit. From the factory, this is a Torx bit. Obviously, it's a hex head now, thankfully. But once I did that, I could have access this Torx bit, and then the driver's side is simply a repeat of what I showed you on the passenger side. So that's really all there is to it. This is not a complicated process like everybody says it is. On all the forums and everything, they're trying to tell you to take the tie rods off, take the upper ball joints out. Maybe you're supposed to, maybe that's the better way to do it, but this is the easy way. This is the way that I found out how to do it, and it worked for me. So, you know, use this way if you want to. If you want to take these ball joints and tie rods out, then go for it. I mean, it's your car. This is the way I did it. This is the way that worked for me, and it really didn't take me that long. I had never done shocks before on a vehicle until this car and this project, and it only took me a few hours. My buddy and I, we got this taken apart, rebuilt the new shocks, put it all back together in one afternoon, and I'm pretty happy with the results. So, like I said, you do not have to take this ball joint out, and you do not have to take this tie rod off. Now the nice thing is when you're done, you should get an alignment. I should get an alignment for this vehicle. However, your steering will not be off because you didn't mess with the tie rods. So I took the car out the night that we finished it, and the steering wheel was still straight. The steering felt great. The car wasn't pulling all over the road. It felt fine. So that's one benefit of doing it my way, is you don't need urgently an alignment once you're done. Now obviously, I installed lowering springs that did lower the car significantly, so the alignment will be off to some extent. So it's always a good idea to get an alignment once you're done. However, it's not immediately necessary if you do it with my method here of not messing with this and not messing with this. So that's what worked for me. Maybe it won't work for you. I hope it does if you're watching this video. It worked for me, and you know, I'm not an experienced mechanic by any means, and it still worked out pretty nicely, and it didn't take us very long at all. So if you have any other, you know, comments or tips in the comments, put it down there. Maybe somebody watching this video is trying to do this themselves, and they can read your tips and advice. But that's what worked for me. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll be putting some more videos up soon, so stay tuned.